Well, hello. Um, you need to provide me with a correct pronunciation for your name. I can work out Sue. There's only one way of pronouncing that, but is it N or Any?
Any.
And you?
Any.
Any. Okay, thank you very much. Well, I'll kick this lesson off because we're now on lesson 5. No, we're not. We're on lesson 6. No, we're not. We're on lesson 5. Stupid boy. Yeah, right. But I'm going to kick it off by going over the lesson plan for this course. So we've had a look at, on lesson 1, the purpose of computer systems and understanding the components that make up a computer system. And I'm specifically talking about the most popular type of computer system. Pretty much all the way through, until this lesson, pretty much all the way through the course. So I've covered the basic building blocks of a typical PC that you would have on your desk. We talked about operating systems in lesson 2. Windows is obviously the world's most prevalent operating system. So a lot of the course is focused around Windows. But I mentioned Hot Contender, which is Linux, and also the new one. Oh, we've got a chat coming in here. Let me get to Zoom and have a look at the chat. I'll come back to that. Right. We then looked at computer software, specifically Microsoft products, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. I briefly touched on Android Studio, which is the Google development environment for Android. I mentioned Delphi, which is a programming tool. Specifically, when it came out, and I first started using it in about, I don't know, about 80 something. It was Object Pascal based. They've now renamed it and called it Embarcadero. The environment's the same, but you can now program in Pascal or C++. And we're going to get on to looking at programming a ways down the line. It's covered in this separate course. But as far as this course goes, we then looked at operating system software, and we looked at some common management components that you get with specifically Windows, but the other operating systems also have the same tools. Selecting a computer operating system, and we looked at different operating systems. The big difference between the majority is some are paid for, as in there's a subscription to buy it, and that goes with Windows and Apple. The other ones that we looked at were basically Linux based in some form or other, and they are open source. So they're free to download. You can even write your own operating system. You can take one of the ones that's out there and amend it to do something different if you want to. So you've got free reign on that. And that's where we are at the moment. But we're going to look at, today, we're going to look at professional operating systems. In lesson 6, we're going to look at configuring computer systems, as in for use for multiple users, etc. In the basic, in lesson 1, we introduced in this course has been, I've taught this course about 4 times before, but for this particular environment, I had to cover another form of computer architecture. I normally cover them Van Neumann architecture, which won't mean anything to you at the moment. And there is a new one called Harvard. They're subtly different, but don't worry about anything that you've missed, because when I dart on a little bit, we've got on the final lesson, we've got a revision opportunity. This lesson, when it was first, well, this course, when it was first written, was only 6 lessons, but this particular release of it is 8 lessons. So I've added one on there specifically because I knew people would arrive later after the start date. So I've made lesson 8 a revision opportunity, and I like to think it will be student driven to revisit any specific content within these lessons, or if you don't, then I will pick what I consider to be the important ones. And certainly one of the important ones is lesson 1, the basic building blocks of a computer system. They're all the same, largely. They've all got the same building blocks inside. So that's the way of the course. You are joining here on lesson 5. So we'll get on with it. So I can get rid of that. Computer operating systems, selection for purpose. Right. We all started off way back with MS-DOS, which is basically Microsoft Disk Operating System. It's a non-graphical command line only operating system developed for IBM compatible computers with an x86 microprocessor. The x86 is a family of microprocessors. It started off with an 8086, then an 8088. Then they went on to 3 digits instead of 4. The 186 was the first, then a 286, a 386, a 486, and then a 586, which bizarrely they renamed. They called it, they didn't release it as a 586, they released it as a Pentium. I'm sure you've heard of Pentium processors. That's largely where we are at the moment. The x86 is a family, and there's a chart in lesson 1 that shows you how the processors were enhanced to provide faster speeds and the ability to address more memory. The first 86 model that came out could only access something like 16 megabytes of RAM. Well, nowadays you don't find a computer with less than about 4 gigabytes of RAM. So the operating systems had to change to keep up with that. MS-DOS used a command line interface for the user to input commands to navigate, open, and manipulate files on their computer. And that's largely all it did. Somebody did write a game that ran on MS-DOS. In fact, several games that ran on MS-DOS, but they were largely graphics limited, and they were very basic. In fact, they were probably written in Visual Basic. Okay, so that's MS-DOS. Features of it's a single user operating system, so only one user can operate at a time. It's a lightweight operating system, allows users to have direct access to the BIOS and its underlying hardware. Loads of data and programs from external sources and bring them in. You can load data. I'm going to get rid of that S. Load data and programs from external sources and bring them into the internal memory so that it can be used on the computer. Now, computers, when they first started off, were particularly dumb machines. They didn't have any memory to speak of, the whole thing was built using valves, and memory was minimal. When you wrote a program, you wrote it onto punch cards. So you had a machine like a typewriter where you typed your instructions, and each instruction went onto a punched card, literally like a postcard, and you punched holes in it. And that went into a punch card reader. The computer read that card, and on it were what an instruction, just an instruction, one instruction. So if you had a complicated program, you could end up with a big wedge, and they were handed around in handfuls, bundles of cards. The process that they actually performed was called batch processing, because all the computer could do at that time was process a batch of cards. It would run through the cards, read them, execute them, and when it had finished, it stopped and generated the results on some kind of display, or perhaps a printer if you're lucky, but very, very basic. Yeah. So it enables the computer to perform input and output operations, such as taking commands from the keyboard, printing information on the screen, and latterly printing information on paper. Not much point in doing a lot of calculations and coming up with results unless you can have a permanent record of the results to share, and for quality management, to be perfectly honest. It's actually very helpful in file management, like creating, editing, deleting files, etc. And an operating system that I'm going to touch on a bit later on in this lesson is Solaris, which I had the fortune to be involved in the system that's running Solaris, which is a Unix-based operating system. And the command line was extremely powerful, much more powerful than the MS-DOS equivalent. You could do far more management with the Unix command line than you could with the Windows command line. It also controls the operating, MS-DOS we're talking about still. It also controls and manages other external devices such as printers, keyboards, external hard drive, using various drive utilities. We have talked about some drive utilities. We'll revisit those again in the revision section. Drawbacks: it doesn't allow multiple users to operate on the system. Yep, single user. It does not support graphical user interface or graphical interface. The mouse cannot be used to operate it. It does not support multi-programming, meaning it can only have one process in the RAM at any time. It also lacked memory protection, which meant no security and less stability. It has difficulty in memory access when addressing more than 640 megabytes of RAM. I've got applications running on my mobile phone that are 5 times the size of that. Windows, this is when the world started to light up. It's an operating system designed by Microsoft to be used on the standard x86, Intel, and AMD processors. It provides an interface known as a graphical user interface, or GUI, which eliminates the need to memorize commands for the command line, because you can use a mouse to navigate through menus, dialog boxes, buttons, tabs, and icons. The operating system was named Windows since the programs are displayed in the shape of a square, because the screen was square. The Windows operating system has been designed for both a novice user, or just using at home, as well as professionals who are into development. as I mentioned, we have touched briefly on development. Specifically, I demonstrated a program that I personally wrote using Android Studio to predict lottery numbers, and it runs on a mobile phone. But we are going to cover programming in great depth on several different platforms in a future lesson. Features of Windows. It was designed to run on any standard x86, Intel and AMD, since most of the hardware vendors make drivers for Windows like Dell, HP, etc. It supports enhanced performance by utilizing multi-core processors. Historically, when the computer as we know it today was designed, it was designed by a guy called von Neumann way back, and it came up with the concept of a core which had all the important attributes of a computer in a chip, effectively, apart from the peripherals, you know, the keyboard, the mouse, etc. It had it had memory that it could address, so it could store a program in the memory. It had the same memory it could use to store data, and it was loaded once and could be run many times, unlike the old punch card thing, which you basically run it once and then you have to put the cards back in again to run it again. A big feature of Windows, it comes preloaded with many productivity tools, which helps to complete all types of everyday tasks on the computer. I mean, it's got a basic, I won't call it a word processor, but it's got a basic typing thing called Notepad. So you can actually write onto a piece of, write some text and print it on a piece of paper. It's got disk management utilities. It's got, and I'm talking about the latest ones, not the very early ones. The latest ones have got something called a task manager, and you can look at what your computer is doing at any stage in time. In fact, I'll run it up so you can see what mine's doing at the moment. Task manager, run as administrator. There you go. There's all the apps on the left-hand side. Then there's the columns on the right there. We've got CPU, how much CPU is being used. At the moment, my computer is using 25% of CPU. And you can see the one that's flashing high there is Zoom, because Zoom is handling the graphics, it's handling the voice. That is the only thing my computer's doing at the moment, as you can see. If we scroll down there, it's all zero. There will be something else. Just sort of ESET. ESET is my antivirus system that I use and have done for years. A very efficient one. It runs on mobile phones. I don't work for ESET, but it runs on mobile phones. I use it on my mobile phones, my tablets. I use it everywhere. You can't buy it in the shops. You can only download it from ESET. It is regularly updated. That's my sales pitch, but I'm not on commission, don't panic. 16% of my memory is being used. We can look at my computer a bit later on so you can see how much memory. I forget how much memory I've got in there. I've upgraded it so many times over the years. This particular one I'm using, I built about 15 years ago, but I built my first one in the 90s, way back when it was a 286 was the processor of flavor then. And I've upgraded my computer as different processors came out. I'm not using any network. That's local area network rather than broadband. Power usage is flashing between high and moderate, and Zoom meetings is the one that's highlighted there. Power usage is low, and you can see power usage very, 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 very low. My daughter had a problem with her computer recently. It become very slow, and she Googled it to find out what the problem might be. I don't know why she didn't ring me. And basically what they told her to do was run this program, Task Manager, and see what was using all the power. It turns out there was a program running in the background that she didn't even know she had loaded. So I don't know, she doesn't know where that came from, but you can kill the processes. So she killed the program and everything went back to normal. So this gives you a snapshot of what your computer's doing at any one stage. Very, very powerful utility. It's free, comes with Windows. I'm running Windows 10 at the moment, basically 10 Professional. But Task Manager has been in there since I can't remember when. The only operating system that I tried and didn't like was Vista. I think it was a mistake that Microsoft made. They should never have released it. It didn't last very long. I think it only lasted less than a year, and they upgraded it. Anyway, that's yeah. I'm sorry. I've just seen Ina and Ini and Sue have responded. You've probably read it anyway, Joshua. But I realised that two of you, it's the first lesson. But I was told that people would join after the first lesson. But we've got lesson 8 to go back over things that I believe are important that you need to know. And one of them is certainly lesson 1. So we can spend a bit of time going back over lesson 1. In the unlikely event that I finish any of the lessons early, I will go back and dive back into lesson 1. So I can backtrack. Why is disk? Oh, okay. Let me. Oops. He needs to ask me a question. Why is this disk 0? Zoom doesn't use the disk. Zoom is just using the CPU to transfer video and sound out to you. There's no disk access at all. There's a light on the front of my computer which flashes when the disk is being accessed. So I would fully expect the disk not to be doing anything. Once it's booted up, unless you go and read a file off of the disk or save a file to disk, the disk will probably never ever kick into life. Anyway, that's get rid of Task Manager. Get rid of that. Blah, 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 Windows has a very large user base, so there's a much larger selection of available software programs, utilities, etc. Windows is backward compatible, meaning old programs can run on newer versions of Windows. I don't play, as I mentioned to Joshua in an earlier lesson, when we mentioned software on computers. I included a section of games. I don't play games on the computer, but I did have a passion for Microsoft Flight Simulator, which is what it says, Flight Simulator. You fly an airplane in your computer. You need good graphics because it's got simulated scenery, very, very good. And the only other thing I play on a computer is a card game called Solitaire. I've subscribed to that. It's now my 15th year, or 15th or 17th year something like that. I've subscribed to Solitaire and I play card games with Microsoft Solitaire, and it's still got my original login. You get so many free games, so the challenge is there, and they give you 5 challenges every day, and it keeps a permanent score. It's very, very good. Anyway, that's the only games I play. Another advantage of Windows, as opposed to perhaps Linux, in fact, definitely Linux, hardware is automatically detected, eliminating the need of manually installing any device drivers. If Windows doesn't have a device driver for whatever device, say you buy a new printer, Windows won't have device drivers for a new printer because it doesn't know what's coming, doesn't know what's in the future. However, it's intelligent enough to tell you, it will pass up a little window. I don't have a driver for this. Excuse me. I don't have a driver for this. Would you like me to search the internet? So you click yes. Excuse me. And away it goes, and it will search the internet for a driver for your printer. So it's Windows is very user-friendly. There was an issue in the early days of Windows with people complaining they get the blue screen of death. That's when Windows encounters an error and can't continue, and it just dies, and all you get is a blue screen saying Windows has died or some such useful message. That was before Windows had memory protection. It now has memory protection. I can't remember the last time I had a blue screen of death. Certainly not in the last 15 years. And probably longer than that. It's a particularly reliable piece of software. My only complaint, I have to say, is Windows 11. They've introduced Windows 11 or released Windows 11, and there's the user base for Windows 10 is something like 100 million people, me included. I've had this computer now, and it's run the last 5 Windows operating systems, but it can't run Windows 11. So I've got to buy a new computer just to run Windows 11, and I'm not very happy with that. I won't buy one. I'll buy a new motherboard and change it. But I don't want to have to do that. I'm perfectly happy with Windows 10 Professional. It's brilliant. But there's 100 million users around the world who are fed up with Microsoft. They've released Windows 11, and it requires a second processor on the motherboard to be able to run. If you haven't got it, you can't even install it, because it will, first thing the install does is check to see if you've got it. So a lot of people are upset with Microsoft at the moment. And in fact, I believe now they're almost telling people don't bother doing it. I think they're going to bring something new out soon. Anyway, that's that. Drawbacks. Windows can be expensive since the operating system is a paid license, and majority of its applications are paid products. Windows has a high computer resource requirement. Like it should have a high RAM capacity, a lot of hard drive space, and a good graphics card. The graphics card really depends on what applications you're running rather than purely Windows. Most motherboards now, that for the last 20 years, most motherboards you buy have a built-in graphics chip on them. And only if you want to run high-end games requiring better graphics do you need to put a graphics card in. The standard card is perfectly, the standard graphics capability of motherboards in the last 20 years has been good enough to run Windows. Windows slows and hangs if the user loads up many programs at the same time. Well, it does, but the answer to that is run Task Manager and terminate the programs that you don't actually need to be running at that time. I mentioned computer architecture. My motherboard is quite a small motherboard. It's not even as big as an A4 sheet of paper. It's got a CPU on it, CPU chip on it, and that chip has got 4 cores. In other words, it's got 4 complete computers on the one chip. So that means I can run 4 programs at once and neither one will interact with the other one or slow the other one. That's the status of computer architecture nowadays. Typically multi-cores. Mine's 15 years old. It's got 4 cores. What's that again? Oh, okay. Yeah, so there's no reason for Windows to run slow. As I said, my daughter had a problem. She identified the program that was causing the problem. It shouldn't have been there anyway. So you can manage it yourself. Windows includes network sharing that can be useful if a user has a network with many PCs. You can find, if you work in a company, you may find that, let's say a particular department, let's say the accounts department has 10 people in there. They will obviously they will, all their computers will be networked. They could be networked to each other, or they could be networked to a common file server, so that all the data from the accounts department is in one place on a file server. There may well be, if you've got 10 users, you don't want to go to the extent of buying 10 printers and giving them one each. So you might nominate a person to have, let's say, a color printer, and you nominate another person to have a black and white printer, a laser printer perhaps, and you can share across, within the accounts department, you can share that printing resource from either of the 2 computers that have got the printer attached to everybody else in the room, or if you wanted to everybody else in the company, but you wouldn't do that. You would logically keep, because the printers are located in the accounts department, there's no point sharing it to somebody that's down in dispatch, because you've got to walk all the way up to the accounts department to pick up their printout. So sharing is a big thing for companies, even universities, government departments, and certainly companies. Windows is vulnerable to virus attacks because, not since, because it has a huge user base. It's a prime target for hackers to go in and try and break into various company networks. And users have to update the operating system to keep up-to-date patches. Microsoft regularly issues a patch, and you'll switch your computer on one day and it will say, it'll flash up and it will say, there is a security patch, press OK to install it. You don't have to, but you're silly if you don't. If Microsoft have gone to the bother of issuing a security patch, my advice is take it. Linux, which we have already mentioned, we will go back to Linux. Linux is an open source operating system project that is freely distributed, cross-platform, and it's developed based on Unix. I first got involved in Unix with, I don't know, let's think, late 80s, I think I first got involved in Unix. The aircraft I was working on had a Hewlett-Packard mini computer in it, and the whole system, excuse me, the whole system was replaced, and it was replaced with a Sun microsystem, and Sun microsystem use Solaris operating system, which is based on Unix. So that's when I got involved in Unix, and I was very impressed. I'm very impressed with Linux. It was developed, originally developed by a guy called Linus Torvalds. And the name Linux comes from the Linux kernel, which is a mix of the first of his name and Unix. So he came up with Linux. It's basically the system software on a computer that allows apps and users to perform some specific tasks on the computer. The development of Linux operating system pioneered open source development. When I taught this lesson, it must have been 5 years ago when I first taught it, I decided to try Linux out for myself, and I installed it on a laptop, and I was very impressed. It's got a Windows look and feel to it. It's lacking in a lot of the Windows built-in features. For instance, disk management. You can load utilities on to do disk management, and they're free. Everything about Linux is free and open source. So you can load these things on. But what I really like about Windows is it comes with them built in. So you haven't got to think about it. Microsoft have already thought about it and think, oh, Steve might want this. You know. So Linux is good, but it's that good that rather than mess around with my computer that I've had for 15 years to go to Windows 11, I'm going to use my backup strategy. I'm going to probably put Linux on it. Ubuntu is the version of Linux that I tried, and that's what I'll put on this machine. And that gets rid of the Windows 11 problem. It does mean I've got to build up my own maintenance tasks, but that's not a problem for me. They're all out there. They're all available. In fact, I forget what the name of the product is, but I found an equivalent of Microsoft Office that runs on Linux. It's free. It runs on Linux, and it reads and writes Microsoft Word, PowerPoint slides. And I did do a demonstration in 5 years ago when I first taught the course. I tried to do it the other day for Joshua, and unfortunately my laptop has died. So I've got another computer under my desk. I'm going to put Linux on that so I can do a demonstration of Linux live. Okay, Linux. Features. Linux is free and can be downloaded from the internet or redistributed under GNU licenses as the best community support. If you've got a problem with Linux, just go to Google and explain what your problem is, and somebody will almost certainly have fixed it somewhere along the line, and will tell you what the fix is. And there are many people, there are many companies. I did list a few of them. There are many companies that have brought out their own version of Linux. There's Red Hat, I can't remember all of them. There's Ubuntu, and there's many of them, and they've all got slight differences. That kind of worries me a bit. With Windows, at least you know your version you've got. When a new version comes out, you ideally would test it on something before you decided to switch to it. which is where I was with the Windows version that I didn't like, which I can never remember the name of. Actually, I did remember it earlier. Okay, Linux is multi-user, multitasking, and Bash is the Linux interpreter program, which can be used to execute commands. Linux provides user security using authentication features and also threat detection. And solution is very fast, so it's very, very quick, because there's a lot of people out there using it. If something goes wrong, somebody will fix it. Drawbacks. There's no standard edition of Linux, so it's confusing for users, and also becoming familiar with Linux may be a problem for new users. So luckily my experience goes back to Solaris, which is Unix based, and it's a very powerful, much more powerful command line interface than MS-DOS. It's more difficult to find applications to support user needs since Linux does not dominate the market. That's true, but you know, there's an awful lot of Windows type application support on for Linux. Since some applications are developed specifically for Windows and Mac, they might not be compatible with the Linux, and sometimes users might not have much of a choice to choose between different applications like in Windows or Mac, since most apps are developed for operating systems that have a huge user base. Some hardware may not be compatible with Linux, since it has patchy support for drivers, which may result in malfunction. But there are plenty of forums to resolve Linux issues. And here we go, Solaris, or Sunos, is the Sun Company's Unix variant operating system that is originally developed as a family of scalable processor architecture-based processors, Spark. And there, if you bought a desktop computer, it was called a Spark station. But it's also, Solaris can also run on Intel-based processors. The Unix workstation had been largely dominated by the operating system during its time. As the internet grew, Sun's Solaris system became the most widely installed service for websites. Oracle purchased Sun. Oracle is a big database supplier, producer. Oracle purchased Sun and later renamed it to Oracle Solaris. But I don't believe they've changed much, apart from the name. Solaris is well known for its scalability. It can handle a large workload and still delivers indisputable performance, advantages for database, web, and Java technology-based services. Solaris systems were known for their availability, that should be. I'll correct that. Really near that, those operating systems. Hardly ever crash any time. It's built for network computing as it provides optimized network stack and support for advanced network computing protocols that delivers high performance networking to most applications. Solaris has advanced unique security capabilities because Unix is a very secure operating system. So Solaris has inherited that. So we've got user rights management, cryptographic framework, and secure by default networking that allows users to safely deliver new solutions. It provides tools much like Windows with its built-in tools. It provides tools to enable seamless interoperability, test new software, and efficiently consolidate application workloads. Drawbacks: it's quite expensive because it's an enterprise-wide operating system. So big companies will be using it. Also, Solaris doesn't provide updates for free. They'll produce them, but they'll charge you for them. Solaris lacks a good graphical user interface support and is not user-friendly. Yes, I would agree with that. When you say user-friendly, could anybody sit down and use it? Probably not. You need a little bit of technical knowledge to be able to get the most out of it. Hardware support is not nearly as good as many other operating systems. I don't think anything beats Windows, to be perfectly honest. Performance would degrade considerably since Solaris cannot make use of different hardware that efficiently at sea. Solaris sometimes becomes unstable and crashes due to total consumption of CPU and memory. So what's needed there is an equivalent of Windows Task Manager to fix that one. Symbian OS was the most widely used smartphone operating system in the world based on ARM architecture until it was discontinued in 2014. It was developed by Symbian Limited, which is a partnership among PDA devices and smartphone manufacturers like early ones like Scion, Motorola, Ericsson, and Nokia. It was explicitly developed for smartphones and handheld digital devices, since the operating system consumes very low power, battery devices, and also for ROM-based systems. ROM is read-only memory. Features: its kernel is known as EKA2. It features preemptive multi-threading scheduling, memory management system, and device drivers. I'm not going to go into much more about that because I don't think Symbian's on the go anymore. I've never come across anything with a Symbian operating system on it. There are some drawbacks. Android. Android is Google's Linux-based operating system. It's designed primarily for touchscreen mobile devices, such as smartphones and tablet computers. The hardware which can be used to support Android is based on 3 architecture types, namely ARM, Intel, and MIPS. Let's use to manipulate mobile devices intuitively with finger movements that mirror common motions like pinching, swiping, tapping, making them very comfortable for their users. The Android operating system is open source operating system, means that it's free and anyone can use it. I mentioned earlier on the demo I did with using Android Studio, free to download. Anybody can download it, and you can write applications. Assuming you know some basic programming, you can write applications for your mobile phone, and you can offer them up to Google's Play Store. They will put it through some checks, and if it passes their checks, they'll happily advertise it for you or distribute it for you. Android offers optimized 2D and 3D graphics, multimedia, GSM connectivity, multitasking. It's known for its friendly user interface and exceptional customizable according to the user's taste. Huge choice of application with users. Play Store offer over 1 million apps, apparently. And this was written 5 years ago. Software developers who want to create applications for the Android OS can download an Android software development kit, now called Android Studio, and easily develop apps for Android with a little bit of programming knowledge. Android consumes very little power but deliver extreme performance since its hardware is based on the ARM architecture. Drawbacks. The design and coding of intuitive modern user experiences and interfaces poses difficulty because of its dependency on Java. Yes, you need to be able to program in Java to program in Android Studio. My career was largely spent as a software engineer, and I've programmed in many different languages. And a point I make when I'm teaching any language is that programming itself is a skill. You've either got the logical mind to be able to put a program together, or you haven't. Actually writing the code is largely the same in all the languages that I've programmed in. So I always make the statement that programming is a skill, the language is just syntax. I started programming Fortran. I then moved on to C and C++, and I've gone through Pascal, Object Pascal, in fact, Delphi, which as it's called. Java is 90% the same as C++ in terms of the reserved words. It's 90% the same. So if you can program in C++, you can program in Java. And a lot of the development software, and I'm thinking about Embarcadero, I'm thinking about Android Studio, will actually almost suggest code. If you type the first word of a loop, for instance, like while, it will automatically put the end in. The editor will automatically put the other end of that block in. All you've got to do is put the lines of code in between. They're so friendly nowadays. Most apps tend to run in the background, even when closed by the user, therefore draining the battery. So if you close a particular application down, it's still sitting there in the background working, and you know that when you on Android, certainly, if you scroll up from the bottom to the top of the screen, it will show you what things it's still got running. Performance is bound to take a hit as multiple programs run simultaneously in the background at any given time. Android phones overheat. I've never had this problem, especially when indulged in hardcore productivity type or heavy graphics. Apps have a lower security profiles and make users more susceptible to data breaches. That's the apps, not the phones, and not the operating system. So it's the applications that are the problem. iOS. I will confess I have never owned an Apple. I've eaten a few, but I've never owned an Apple. I don't have an issue with Windows. I particularly like Windows. But I don't suppose I would have. I know my daughter and son-in-law have both got Apple phones, and I think he uses an Apple laptop. But it's largely the same as Windows, but underlying at the bottom of it, it's a Unix-based operating system. But I don't believe you get involved in the command line area with Apple. Features, it's written in C, C++, Objective-C, and Swift, and is based on the Macintosh operating OS X. Has excellent and intuitive user interface and very fluid response. Performance of iOS is unbeatable. That's not a quote from me. That's something I found on the World Wide Web. iOS comes with a lot of default apps, including email client, web browser, media player, and the phone app. Availability of high quality apps can be downloaded from the App Store, I'm sure at a cost. Apple has provided its own iOS software development kit for the developers to create applications. iOS is much safer than other mobile operating system and has fewer security breaches as well. I have to say, I do believe that iOS is particularly secure. You hear a lot about mobile phones, typically Google phones, getting a bug of some kind. But I very rarely, I don't think I've ever heard of Apple iOS getting one. Drawbacks: it's closed open source instead of open source, and its beta testing taking a lot of time since it's only available to limited developers. So if they're developing a new release, they will put it out to developers to test first before they put it out to the public. The amount of memory space the iOS applications occupy is very large compared with other mobile platforms. Lack of customization compared to other operating systems. Doesn't allow third-party installations. Having intense graphics and animation consumes more power and causes battery drains. iOS is resource-intensive operating system due to which older devices struggle to run it. I do see that quite often when they say there's a new version coming out and they list the phones that won't support it. I've noticed that. I would be annoyed if, well, Windows have just done the same thing, Microsoft have done the same thing. My computer is going to cease to be supported in October this year. And they've been trying to get me for over 12 months now. They've been trying to get me to buy a new one. So, OS selection for purpose. We'll now examine 3 of the main purposes of some commercial operating systems and identify the most appropriate. We'll have to go a bit quick because we're not quite going to finish this today. Databases and web servers. The best suitable operating systems for database and web server management is Solaris, a Unix operating system, which itself is designed for enterprise web servers where robust applications and databases are deployed, where throughput is very high and needs to serve 24/7 up and tolerates little downtime. These are the reasons. It uses a ZFS, a zettabyte file system, which is revolutionary file and logical volume manager. Controls the storage and retrieval of data, which is not found in any other operating system. Solaris provided with a service management facility. So that's going back to your Windows tools that are standard built in, but this is built in for enterprise-wide system. Even in the case of hardware and software failures, it's got a self-healing capability, so it can actually fix itself if something goes wrong, which of course somebody's had a program. And Solaris provides very, very good, awesome observability utilities which can be used to find performance bugs, functional bugs, and kernel bugs. Solaris scales well on multi-socket, multi-core systems with a large number of cores due to Solaris's broader CPU support. And Solaris, because of its Unix background, provide strict security, providing additional barriers and immune systems to prevent data breaches to their servers. So in summary, Solaris is a reliable, very stable, extremely fast and secure operating system compared to other OSs, which have raw performance and security problems. And the ideal operating system for any commercial application. Cluster computing. This is where you link several computers together to provide a much more powerful computing system. It's a bit like my 4-core CPU in there. It's got 4 processors instead of 1. So cluster computing is bringing together all those. Actually, it was big in the 70s. There was a company that would rent your downtime when your computer's not being used for you, like in the 2 o'clock in the morning, you leave it switched on, providing it was networked, they would use your processor. I never signed up for that. Not having anybody else use my computers. Product yeah, Linux distributions. There are many versions of Linux, and they're called distributions or distros. If you hear about Linux distros, that's distributions. Red Hat is one, CentOS is one, and those two are best suited for clusters like there's one famous one, the Beowulf cluster. Productivity and daily tasks. The best operating system productivity is Windows because it is intuitive, cohesive, functional, and very user-friendly. Windows offers the best selection of software and can run on widest variety of hardware that the user has. Yeah, that's just banging on about Windows. You already know I like it. Yeah, and that's just Windows. I suspect you're probably using Windows. So that just summarizes why I use it. And I think it's the best. Now, I haven't got time to put this on now. I'll put this on the start of the next lesson. It's only 2 minutes. Azure, is it the future? I'll let you think about that when I've shown the video actually I'll put it on now. And if you can hang around long enough to see the end of it, you can form your own opinion. But if not, we'll revisit this again on the start of the next lesson. But I'll show that. I'll put that.
Microsoft Azure is a private and public cloud platform. You may be familiar with the Azure services that developers and IT professionals use to build, deploy, and manage applications. But how does it work? Azure uses a technology known as virtualization. Virtualization separates the tight coupling between a computer's CPU and its operating system using an abstraction layer called a hypervisor. The hypervisor emulates all the functions of a real computer and its CPU in a virtual machine. It can run multiple virtual machines at the same time, and each virtual machine can run any compatible operating system, such as Windows or Linux. Azure takes this virtualization technology and repeats it on a massive scale in Microsoft data centers throughout the world. Each data center has many racks filled with servers. Each server includes a hypervisor to run multiple virtual machines. A network switch provides connectivity to the servers. One server in each rack runs a special piece of software called a fabric controller. Each fabric controller is connected to another special piece of software known as the orchestrator. The orchestrator is responsible for managing everything that happens in Azure, including responding to user requests. Users make requests using the orchestrator's web API. The web API can be called by many tools, including the user interface of the Azure portal. When a user makes a request to create a virtual machine, the orchestrator packages everything that's needed, picks the best server rack, then sends the package as request to the fabric controller. Once the fabric controller has created the virtual machine, the user can connect to it. Azure makes it easy for developers and IT professionals to be agile when they build, deploy, and manage their applications and services. But this agility can have unintended consequences if unauthorized resources are created, or if resources are left running after they're no longer needed. The solution to this problem is to use Azure's resource access management tools as part of your organization's governance program. That's the subject of the next video in the series.
Okay. Well, that's it for today. And we'll see you again on Thursday. Same time, same channel. The concept behind Azure is let's say I want a Windows 11 computer and I don't want to build one. So I've got, as long as I've got some kind of system here where I can access the internet, I can request they provide me with a Windows 11 platform for 3 days next week. And they give me a link to log on. And I don't own a Windows 11 computer, but I can run one via my browser. So good idea. I don't know what the cost is, however. So that's it. That's it for today. Has anybody got any questions on anything we've covered today?